Magician's Bookshelf. Yes, I am an actual magician, and this evening we're going to be taking a look at some recommended books on tarot from an academic perspective. We looked in our previous live video at 10 recommended books for the academic study of Western Esotericism, and today I'm going to follow up with recommended books on tarot from a historical, art perspective and cultural perspective within academia itself. Now, there are far fewer books on tarot from an academic perspective than there are from on Western esotericism, on theosophy, on Gnosticism, and so forth. Tarot is very underserved within the academic community. And here I'm talking about universities, graduate studies, and particularly postgraduate studies, for example, papers for PhDs and so forth. There are some that have focused in on particular people, for example, Ethel Coloon, Austin Osman Spare, perhaps, and so forth, but there are very, very few generally good books on historical tarot, or the history of tarot, cartomancy, and playing cards, which partly accounts for a lot of the misinformation that still to this day goes around, even though Waite tried to rectify tarot in 1909 and say it's not from ancient Egypt, it's not the Waite-Smith tarot was not used by gypsies, and Waite should have known because he was the one with Pamela Common-Smith who designed it. It was only until about the 30s to the 50s that it then got conflated back to ancient Egypt and the ancient mysteries and dark occultism and so forth, mainly to sell women's magazines more than anything. So I'm going to look at several books that I recommend. Now, some of these are out of print because, again, it is so underserved and under-recognized within the tarot world, within the academic world. I think there are now a few more studies going on and so forth, a lot more research going on, and there have been some more generalist historical coverages of tarot. For example, the history of the art of tarot. There have been some books by, I think, Taschen, for example, in the esoteric history, esoterica series and things like this. But I'm going to take a look at the ones that I would stand by in terms of their research. And just to go back to yesterday's video or the previous video, if you're watching these in the recording, then the name of the occult group, the magical group that I was trying to think of yesterday was the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor. And this is one of the books on the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor by Godwin, Chanel, and Devaney. And that was the group that I was trying to remember yesterday. So I knew I'd find it, and this was the guy who sort of set up that group. So it was way ahead. Thomas Burgoyne, I think is how you pronounce it. And yeah, it's very interesting pre-Theosophical Society sort of group. So it's worth looking into that if you're interested. And Max Theon as well, a very, very interesting historical occultist, Max Theon. So this is a great book to get if you're interested in the early foundation of modern occult groups, occult orders, and so forth. So that's just a postscript to yesterday's video, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor. So we're going to start this. I'd highly recommend, if you can get hold of any of these, the Encyclopedia of Tarot. It's in several volumes, and we'll look at each of them. But this was the book that my recently departed father bought for me every year that it came out. and this first printing was in 1978. So I would have been, 13 when this came out, and I got it for Christmas from my dad because I was already interested in tarot. And this is still the same book. I've kept it all those years since I was 13, and I used to go through this and read everything about it. Arthur Edward Waite, I didn't realise when I was 13 that I'd come to write a book on Waite with co-author Tarley Goodwin, and earliest references to playing cards. Let's see if you can see that. Earliest reference to playing cards, because of course the history of tarot really intersects with the history of playing cards and the history of divination, cartomancy and fortune telling. So Stuart Kaplan, a vast amount of primary source material that a little while ago went up for auction, a lot of his collection. Obviously US Games has the rest of that collection. And so this goes through in absolute intricate detail early references to playing cards, playing at games of dice and trick-tack, in French and German and Italian sources, European sources, for the original history of tarot itself. And then we start to come up with the very early types of tarocchi, and then which gallery they're in. So the Carey collection at Yale University, and the Pierpont Morgan Library, and the Brera Gallery, where Tolly and I went to see the Solar Busker a few years ago. So, and the Victoria and Albert Museum that we did some research for the Secrets of the Waite Smith book. So this is as it says, an actual encyclopedia of tarot. And I would sit and just read through these, look at the tarocchi, the Mantachina cards, and just try and work out which ones were my favorite, which ones had lots of secret symbols in them, whether I understood the symbols and so forth. So this is a must-have reference guide, and it goes on to, what's that note there? Some interesting notes there. Go and see Adam McLean up in Scotland. A note about going to see Adam McLean. So Visconti Sforza, of course, one of the most recognised early decks of tarot, and we have lots of great black and white examples. And so then other Visconti and Visconti Sforza tarocchi decks. You can see some of these. I think this set here in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And what you don't get from the black and white pictures is the fact that these are gilt gold, almost like duvet covers. They are really thick cards. You would not have shuffled with them. These were not meant for cartomancy, for playing games or anything. So, right. So, sorry, I'm checking up with the notes. Thank you for being here if you're joining me in the live. I think volume 1 is the best one to get of this series, because it really goes into the history and it doesn't go back on this in the later volumes. It's more of a catalogue in the later volumes, but this one has a lot of the history. And again, the images are all in black and white, but I would then get very excited about all of the modern decks. And of course, this takes us up to the 70s. So obviously it doesn't catalogue things after it was published. So there's a very sort of 70s, late 70s feel to a lot of these, which in turn, I guess, led to my sort of first purchases were all decks that I recognised from here. and they were all very sort of 60s, 70s, New Age sort of decks, and obviously the occult and esoteric ones. We have the Thoth Tarot, so a page here on the Thoth Tarot, and work text on the Thoth Tarot, which is fairly solid research, fairly solid factual stuff, all of this on the Thoth. And so many different styles of deck. Already, even in the late 70s. And then we've got more sort of playing cards from Stuart Kaplan's Tarot collection. So these are more like the tarot cards. When I lived in Switzerland for a while, I actually bought a tarot deck and used it for tarot readings, but it was obviously meant as I bought it in just a supermarket, and it was obviously used for playing gambling games and stuff like that. And then, rather bizarrely, we have a load of spreads at the back here, so spreading the tarot deck, which I can't remember how much I used it. I know I used the royal spread on occasion, because I remember the picture, and the horseshoe spread. But these are more like Etelia type spreads, not necessarily suited for tarot in a sense, because they're just so big. Although we do have the Celtic Cross and the simple sample tarot card reading at the back there, and then some conclusions, and then a massive glossary at the back here, and index, of course. So that is volume 1, or just at the time, the Encyclopedia of Tarot. It was called volume 1, so they obviously intended it. Hello, Apox. Yep, just in time. I've sprung this as a bit of a surprise, just in the sense of I'm trying different times for this so that YouTube can give me the analytics and see when a good time is for most people and things like that. So then we have volume 2, and this one is in a bit of a state because I've used it and kept it over the years. Again, there's a bit of history in this one, so early references to playing cards and Tarot. Stuart Kaplan was born on April Fool's Day, so he always identified with the Fool, which is strange for saying he got into tarot so much. So we've got a sort of introduction there, some historic decks, a lot more about the Italian and Renaissance decks, and the Visconti material. And actually, there's quite a lot of that. I'd forgotten how much of that there was. So that's like that much of the book is, again, further history. Now we've got some colour illustrations, which is very useful. Obviously, mainly playing cards at this stage of the book. Early symbolism of the major arcana, looking at the Visconti, the Waite-Smith, the Thoth, and so forth. And then a lot of tables, I remember, about different orders of the major arcana, different naming conventions for the major arcana, going by country, references. Then Magick cards, which is, again, a bit of an undiscovered area of tarot, looking at the Magick cards. You can read with those. And then we go back into the sort of cataloguing of further decks from the Jean Neblay onwards. And so we've got a sort of catalogue of cards, mainly playing cards, I think, in this book. Yes, I remember I wasn't as impressed with this book the second year that my dad bought me this one for Christmas, because it was mainly playing cards and it wasn't as much sort of tarot as I was studying it and understanding it. But then we come to volume 3, so we're now at 3 massive volumes. And this is where it really gets interesting. We have colour versions of like the Jungian deck, obviously the Waite-Smith, Sacred Rose, the New Age deck, All of these decks I would buy at the time. As soon as I saw them in this, I used this as my main reference for deck purchasing. The Morgan Greer, favourite, the Mythic Tarot, a favourite of many readers of a certain age. The Mother Piece, the first round tarot deck. And so this was far more exciting to have all of these lured, dangled in front of me. And it is, again, a extensive catalogue of tarot. You can still go to Adam McLean's site. He still has his database of tarot, because he has one of the larger tarot collections in the world, and that's available on his Alchemy website. So this again is then a massive catalogue of tarot, more tarot than you can possibly hope to read for in a lifetime. And this is a massive, massive collection. And then we have volume 4. And this has 11,000 different tarot decks, or different tarot cards. And now we include 100 Japanese tarot decks in this, and a bibliography of over 1,500 books. So this is, again, an essential work to guide you elsewhere. Yeah, the Robert Wang tarots and his books are very, very good, very, very useful, and definitely you should have those on your wish list. So again, this sort of keeps up with the encyclopedic references, and it brings it up to date. And we have one of my favorite chariot cards, actually. This one from the Heindel tarot deck. It's an astonishing image of the robed figure, and it's just an astonishing deck altogether, the Heindel deck. I got mine under very strange circumstances as well, so it's a favourite personal deck. The Jewel Tarot I actually like quite a lot as well. I've used that for demonstration readings because it's a nice clear deck for demonstration readings when you're teaching tarot. And so basically this is just then a massive, massive list and catalogue, lifetime work really is, of tarot. And I don't think you can say you appreciate tarot in its entirety without at least having scanned these books and recognize just how many tarot decks there are. And this this book came out, volume 4, in I'd forgotten that this was actually signed for me. Huh. So that was from Stuart and Jean. When did this come out? (2005). So this is now 20 years ago. So can we imagine just how much has gone on in tarot in the last 20 years to the time of this recording? That we have this set of books for tarot up until 2020, and this barely touches the Japanese decks. There's now a lot of South Korean decks, Philippine decks, decks from all over the world that would, obviously we now move from this to a full-on database on the internet, because a book isn't going to be able to keep up with all of the thousands of decks that are now made. Think about Kickstarter alone. We could have an encyclopedia of tarot Kickstarter decks alone. So I recommend, if you can get hold of these on the second-hand market at a reasonable price, then certainly number 1 and perhaps number 4 because this has got like a lot of up-to-date decks and so forth. Maybe not so much number 2, perhaps number 3 if you want to catch up with the 70s tarot, but probably volume 1 is essential and volume 4 is really useful, and the other 2 volumes in the middle. Hope that makes sense, and I hope that's useful as a starter. So let's just move these off the table, if I can watch my back. Then the next book from an academic point of view, and we basically only have Decker, Duma and De Paulis as our series. Oh, hello, Ohio. Hello, Teresa. We only have Decker, Duma and De Paulis as our main historians of tarot, but their work comes with a particular perspective and a particular viewpoint that does change, particular in Decker's case that we'll come on to. They approach it very much as a history of card playing, of cards, of art, and this is a very, very academic treatise. So Duma, with the assistance of Sylvia Mann, this is published by Duckworth. Again, it's out of print and I think a bit expensive to buy now, but if you, again, want the actual academic perspective, or at least the starter of your reading, then chapter 4 in particular of the Game of Tarot from Ferrara to Salt Lake City is essential reading. If you are studying a subject academically, you have to do a reading list and you have to show you've read everything that's ever been published on that, particularly if you're doing a PhD, and then critique it and show how your work is new to everything that's already been published. So you are academically bound to understand and have read everything that's been published in whatever language is published about your particular subject. I couldn't do for my PhD Egyptophilia and the occult because I couldn't read German, and a lot of stuff on ancient Egypt is written by German archaeologists. Similarly, I couldn't do a study on the New Thought movement and their curriculum because I couldn't get to America, where all of the warehouses of New Thought pamphlets and catalogues and collections actually are. So again, these books are the foundation stone for an academic study of tarot. You would have had to have read and understood these books in order to then start working on rewriting them, summarizing them, taking a particular slice and furthering research in that particular area. But these are the foundations. So this is where it mentions the Steele document, which is one of the first lists of what we would now call the major arcana. And then they go into the occult, which is where they start to have a particular perspective on the place of the occult and occultists in muddying the waters of tarot history and symbolism. Now, I don't think they treat weight too badly, but it wouldn't surprise me if they do a little bit. Yeah, so then it talks about Levi, Valiant, Cortegeblin, Etilia, and sort of saying that we have to disregard their so-called evidence, but we do have to mention them as writers on the tarot. Then the early stages of the game in France, and then this goes to the Minciet deck as well, and then the early Italian game of tarot, and then it moves more into sort of German versions, Bavarian versions, all sorts of other versions of tarot. So it does cover the sort of occult side of tarot, but only in passing as part of the sort of survey of tarot through the ages. So this is, again, an essential book if you're going to talk about academic studies of tarot per se, in terms of its history at least, then Dumas, The Game of Tarot, is really important. Now that is followed up by, I would guess, we've got This one, now this one is by Decker and Dumay, or Dumet, I never know how to pronounce it. And this specifically looks at occult tarot 1870 to 1970. Hello, Carol. Hello, hello, hello. So this talks about the Thoth Tarot, the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor. This is why I was trying to remember it yesterday. And the sort of Kenneth Mackenzie, Eliphas Levi, and the transmission of tarot from the sort of French occult scene into the English occult scene via Mackenzie, who was a Freemason, who was a member of the SRIA, and out of that came Woodman, Westcott, and Mathers, who founded the Golden Dawn, from which came Waite, from which came Crowley, and there we have our full link of tarot as we know it, outside of the history, but through the occult side of things. The Insight Institute, very interesting deck, Richard Gardner, that was very popular in the 70s, and I've got quite a lot of their material because that was one of the main ways to learn tarot at the time. Oh, excellent, Tony. Thank you for catching up on the videos. In the members only section, we have some interesting videos there, and I'm providing a load more. So this then goes on to Paul Foster Case, Bota, the builders of the Aditum, C.C. Zane and the Church of Light. Again, I've got a lot of his material because he taught tarot very well in a very interesting way. And there's a lot of material from the Church of Light that is the foundation, a sort of offshoot of Golden Dawn type teaching, of occult teaching, and so forth. And some stuff from Russia. Ouspensky briefly wrote something on tarot, which is just a odd and interesting piece, a sort of meditation of mindfulness on the tarot. Switzerland, and so forth. And then it goes to Gareth Knight and the Servants of Light, and Eden Gray and the Waite Smith Tarot and from here we really have our foundation from Eden Gray, very influential on Rachel Pollack, Mary Kay Greer, and the Renaissance of Tarot forthwith. So that really catches us up. Now, Decker had then a change of perspective, I think, and really wanted to go into the esoteric tarot. So this has been a little bit decried in the sense of it is less academic than this. So I'd recommend this, but it is not necessarily what we might call a pure academic book. And a lot of the books that do purport to be a history of the tarot or a overview of the tarot, they are not really academic in the pure sense of it. Particularly some of the ones that have come out recently, they're not written by academics in the sort of stricture that we would have. And if you want an example of that, the esoteric tarot, this is less academic. You can sort of tell it's less academic. It talks about hidden hieroglyphs, astral archetypes, and things like that. And it's sort of, I think people accused Decker, from memory, I can't recall the exact details, but of almost falling into the trap of believing the esoteric side of things in writing about it. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But this is, it's certainly an odd and interesting book. It's sort of, it falls somewhere in between academic and astral, sort of experiential, occult, numinous. So it's an odd book, this one, because it is neither one thing or the other, but it's an interesting and useful book to have, but not as essential from the academic point of view as this one. Now, the next academic book I'd say is Hargrave's History of Playing Cards and a Bibliography of Cards and Gaming. This, again, a bit like the Encyclopedia of Tarot, it's a catalogue, basically, of playing cards, but also tarocchi, tarot and tarot decks, all of which have slight variations in them. So this is, it's not the sort of book you sit down and read on a holiday. It is literally a sort of catalogue from the museums, from the art galleries that have got collections of decks. And we have very useful lists. This is from the United States Playing Card Company. I don't know if they still exist. And this is their collection, and it's all listed. And sometimes you can't tell from the list, but you see something like astronomical cards 1829, and when you actually go and look at them, it turns out it's a sort of massive esoteric, hidden, unknown, unpublished view of decadent astrology within the tarot cards themselves or playing cards themselves. So you can quite often get surprised by quite bland listings in the catalogues for what the actual thing is when you understand the sort of context, and if you're doing particular research into the esoteric or occult side of things. So, A History of Playing Cards, there are several books similarly named, A History of Playing Cards, so I'll definitely get one of them so that you know the context into which our cartomancy actually falls. Then I'm going to bring us up to a slightly more modern academic book or semi-academic book. We're now veering far more into independent scholarship, independent academics. And Emily E. Auger is a prolific promoter of the understanding of tarot in culture. And this is 2 volumes, which is available, still available in print. I think it's self-published from memory. Valley Home Books. Oops. Sorry, my just give me one moment. My okay, there we go. Hopefully that will hold there. It's not perfect. Let me just zoom in a little bit there and move this down. The stand is it's got a mind of its own. There we go. Oh, excellent, Tony. Great. So, yeah, so volume 1 is, and this is a collection, and we have Michael Dumert appearing again in here, but this is a really useful collection, particularly book 1, of materials on tarot. So we have Tarot in Popular Culture, Iconography, that's by Robert Place, Tarot in Egyptomania by Helen Farley, and some of these names you'll recognise perhaps. Richard Kaczynski talking about the Crowley-Harris Thoth Tarot, Tarot on the Threshold, Liminality and Illegitimate Knowledge by some would-be hack author called Marcus Katz, don't know who he is. And then, really usefully, a tarot timeline assembled by Mary K. Greer. And that's a really useful part of the book that has a sort of timeline of tarot, if I can find it. So there's mine. And mine talks about tarot discussion groups and the rise of tarot conferences. This is a bit before we started doing our own tarot group and tarot conferences. Right, so where's the... yeah, so here's the timeline. So basically, it starts off in 1750 and then moves on through the very sort of more important, and again, it's not really complete, but it doesn't aim to be, but it does pick out some really useful points of time. in the development of tarot to the present day. But all of the essays in this, I can't speak for my own, of course, but all of the essays in this are really interesting and useful. And there's a volume 2 as well. And in volume 2, oh yes, so volume 2 is actually, has got the Greater Trumps in, Helen Farley's work, Mary K. Greer, Emily Auger's work on the Wonderland Tarot. So different articles of different aspects of tarot, but actually written in a academic point of view. Emily very kindly edited my article in this, my paper in this, and wow, she did a fantastic job, an incredible job of editing. It was really excellent editor for academic writing. So Tarot in Culture, edited by Emily E. Auger. Try volume 1, and that's got the useful timeline in. But again, I don't think you can really talk about academic studies of tarot unless you've come across Emily's Tarot in Culture. Now, as a by the by, I'd also say Cartomancy and Tarot in Film. Emily's been collecting these for a long time, and this book is a list of, like, if you want to know which films, which TV series the Hierophant appears in, then this is the book for you. It's highlighted in 4 films, and it appears in passing in another 4 films, including The Craft, Hello Again, Operation Endgame, and sometimes they come back again, which is the films that tarot usually appears in are usually either avant-garde or horror, and sometimes murder mysteries as well, of course. So The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. So yeah, this is really interesting, and it goes through a sort of timeline. So Hellboy. So if you want to know the source, the writers, the cards, death appears, and some prop cards, because quite often to get around copyright and licensing costs, films tend to, James Bond is obviously the really, that was partly what got me into tarot or encouraged my interest in tarot, is Jane Seymour, of course, as a young boy. So we have an alphabetical list of films and the cards that appear in them. And as I say, it's quite often you get prop cards, and still to this day, someone will say, what card is this? Which, yes, more votes for Jane Seymour. And people will say in our Facebook group, I saw this in a streaming film yesterday, what deck is it? And it's usually 2 or 3 cards, quite often Death, the Hangman, or the Lovers, and they've been drawn by the production team just for a prop for that film, and quite often there isn't a full deck that they've come from, which is sometimes quite galling, because sometimes the cards are really interesting and really nice that they produce. So that, again, from an academic point of view, we need if you were going to write about tarot in popular culture, you would have had to have read this so that you understood a reasonably comprehensive survey of which cards were in which films and what impact that they might have had. Then, where else do we have? I think that's about it for now in terms of what I would recommend. There's already a fair bit in there. I do have a few here, but they're not, perhaps, they're a little bit more general, I guess, or too specific. So, Dr. Terror's House of Horror, Peter Cushing. Excellent. Yeah, Peter Cushing, Vincent Price, what's the other guy's name? Christopher Lee. Yeah, all occult heroes of mine as well, back in the day. Ovi O'Neill's Tarot Symbolism. This was written for the Association for Tarot Studies back in the day. And this again is a fairly academic treatise of the history of tarot, but it veers away more into commentary, interpretation, a sort of linked narrative of the meaning of the cards. Goes back to thoughts about ancient paganism in the Renaissance and how that then affected the tarot potentially, but it's less academic than the academic books I've already mentioned. But I would give this, an honorary mention, as definitely this is actually perhaps a bit more readable to some extent, but it does veer around a sort of narrative rather than it being a strict academic piece of work. But I would recommend that one as well if you see a copy of it. So we've got things like History of Playing Cards, of which I've got several books similar to that one, but this is the one I'd recommend. Similarly, a History of the Occult Tarot. Tarot in Culture, if you want to get up to speed with academic and semi-academic approaches to the tarot. Some folk in there are not in academia anymore, such as myself, and so we're not writing it to present at a conference surrounded by other historians and academics who specialize in tarot. These books are for a general audience, for one thing. And we do have other books. I was debating books like this, but perhaps we'll do another series. I'll do another live on Austin Spare's tarot, because this is an interesting historical discovery that is fairly recent, fairly contemporary, and Austin Spare has come back into a bit of prominence. He was during the Chaos movement in the sort of 70s into the 80s, but then interest in him died down again. But then someone discovered there's Pamela Coleman Smith, misspelt with an E. And these are, I saw these more recently in the Warburg exhibition of tarot, and they're really interesting because the cards overlay each other. Symbols move from one card across into another, and his artwork is incredible anyway. And then we have the sort of cartomantic readings up in the top. Not afraid to actually write the meanings on the cards. The Knave of Spades, a professional man, or upside down, independence. So Austin Spare was no stranger to altered states, and a lot of his work, such as the Zoskia cultus and the death posture, is all to generate artistic state, altered states and artistic states. I love this Knight of Pentacles. He was a very, very, very powerful portrait painter. Yeah, so you can see how the cards sort of overlap in their design and so forth. A fascinating concept. And this was discovered in the Society of Magic archives. How it got there, I'm not sure. It might tell the story in here. But yeah, at some point, we will do a... And this is a book that PRS Foley in 1904. This is a book that really affected a lot of people's cartomantic readings, and this is the book that was cribbed a lot by the magazines that then popularized playing card reading through the 30s and 50s. So again, this is an essential book if you want to understand the meaning of playing card interpretation and so forth. Foley's fortune telling by cards is an important piece of that whole puzzle. We write about that in Tarot Time Traveller, but again, because of the lack of interest in an academic approach or a historic approach to tarot, Tarot Time Traveller has returned back to us in terms of its rights, and Llewellyn are going to let it go out of print because there's not enough interest to justify another printing of it. So the academic world is quite small because the academic world audience is quite small. So yeah, we'll actually do a separate video on Austin Osterman Spare's deck and perhaps do some readings with it as well, because I've not got around to doing that. I have the Assos deck that was produced quite recently, or within the last couple of years, I think, but I've not even had time to take that out of the box yet. So it'd be a good reason to work with Austin Spare's tarot, perhaps even do some chaos magic with it or something along those lines. The Alphabet of Desire would be good to merge with it, but that's a whole different subject, sigils and the tarot cards. Okay, so I hope that's given you some ideas. Now, as I say, there are several books. There's the Taschen book. There was one on the history of the art of the tarot, very big, very glossy books. And there are some problems academically with those books because they are sold as sort of general reading, as a overview of tarot and so forth, but sometimes they're historically incorrect. Sometimes they haven't been peer reviewed because there are virtually hardly any peers to actually review things at this level. And so sometimes they repeat things that aren't necessarily true or taken out of context, or they mix factual things with a slight bias, both for and against occultism, and so on. But they are not technically academic, peer-reviewed pieces of work, so I've not mentioned those. But again, we can do another video at some point on general reading and popular books on the tarot, contemporary books, and perhaps look at some of the issues with those books and some of the good things about those books, where it encourages people, for example, to produce more diverse decks, more decks with representation in them, all sorts of things that contemporary and popular books actually help the tarot develop from, and means that it is no longer history that we're looking at, it is the future that we're looking at. So, okay, that is brilliant. Oh, excellent. Lost on voice call. The Assos box is this. And this has the Assos Tarot in it. You can see I've not even, and this is the second version of Lost Envoy that came with the box set. And this is basically looking at Professor Foley's book. It's a reprint of Foley's book, which is also available online. To show where Spare was getting his ideas from, and meanings for the deck, and then a sort of timeline of meanings. So yeah, I think this will be an interesting deck to actually use. Again, mine's currently unopened. So yeah, I think that's still available. I don't know how much it is. I can't remember. I was probably in an altered state when I purchased it, but yeah, I've been interested in Austin the Spare for an awfully long time. In fact, just right in front of me from the Chaos Magic stuff, this is my original version of, from the Bow Repair Nexus again, of Earth Inferno and the Zosky Occultist book, published by Sorcerer's Apprentice, so it's long fallen into disrepair and disrepute. But this is what I was talking about, the alphabet of desire and the sigillography of Austin the Spare, that we could perhaps look at how we use that with the tarot. So yeah, we started off with tarot history and we've ended up with Austin the Spare, so that's not a bad journey we've been on. Thank you for everyone being here in the live. So we're going to close off now. If you've got any questions, just please drop them in the comments. And any questions about tarot, the history of Western Esotericism. We do have a members only part of this channel now, so I'm encouraging people to join us in that as a wayfarer, a tarot wayfarer, and we're doing a lot of new videos for that. I'm going to be producing some series for that won't be public, because then we can have closer discussions, and it's only about $4.99 a month or something, so I've tried to make that accessible to as many people as possible. Okay, thanks everyone, and yeah, I'll be doing another live tomorrow. I think, no, not tomorrow. I've got 2 days off doing lives because I've got the boot camp again, the YouTube boot camp I'm on, teaching us how and encouraging us to use lives, to use live stream, to use the membership system and things like that. YouTube are currently working with 100 creators in the UK, including myself, to test and develop and give feedback to a lot of the things that YouTube are introducing. In terms of community building, I think that's really what they're after, as well as advertising spend and analytics and people to produce more content for them to drop adverts into, obviously. But on the surface, they are building community tools as well. So yeah, I'm going to put quite a bit more stuff in the membership section. We are not short of material, that is for sure. So thanks a lot for joining me. Do catch up with the recording if you joined us late, and in future I'll probably be announcing when the lives are going to be in the community tab that is public on the channel itself. So if you want to check out when I'm running a live, I'll have a schedule up in advance from probably next week onward. Thanks a lot for being here with me, and as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop. Bye for now.